Welcome to Baseball and Coffee, episode 25 with Tino and Aaron. What's up, Aaron?
Not too much. Kind of grumpy this morning.
What's going on?
Fangraphs, when you go to the login section, it breaks. And I've been trying to find stats to prepare for our pod, and just like I've forgotten how many ads are like in your face all the time. And I paid like $6 or something so that I could get the ad-free site because I spent so much time on there, and it's just they're so obtrusive, and it just won't work this morning. I keep trying, and it's my last day of work, and so I need coffee, but I can't have coffee, so I'm just grumpy.
It's funny. Well, I'm just rising. It's a little earlier over here, 7 o'clock in the morning, but 7 a.m. on a Saturday is normal soccer watching time, so it's pretty normal for me on this end. What do you got with coffee?
I have 2 coffees I'm going to be roasting before our next pod. I have a washed Ethiopia green coffee and a Peru coffee. So I'm going to be roasting those up and tasting those. So I'll report back next show how those were. But it's been a couple weeks I've had the roaster out. So I got a couple coffees and going to break it back out. Keep the habit going.
Awesome. What region is Ethiopia from? Do you know?
I will find that out for you. I know it's a washed, but I will look it up and find out if it's like Timbuktu or Sidamo but I will find out.
Cool. Awesome. So I finally made a V60 yesterday, and it was really, really good. It was just the normal. This is an obvious, like, I need coffee story because it was actually a blend from the Walla Walla Roastery. Decaf, right? It was not decaf this time, no.
Got some caffeinated coffee. Thanks.
But it brought back a whole lot of memories of running my own coffee shops, and everything from wetting the filter against the V60 to I remembered the measurements. All of it was very, it's 300 gram or 15 grams in, 300 grams out, try for a 3-minute drop time, all those sorts of things. It was just, it all came back like baseball stats would, right? But it was something that I hadn't accessed in a long time. And the biggest takeaway was just how different, this is pretty obvious, but just how different coffee can be from one process to the next. Because I normally drink a normal brewed pot of coffee, and of course I weigh it out and use the baratza to grind it. And so I'm not, and try to use quality water, so there's some steps that I'm taking to make it a little bit different than your just standard cup of coffee. But this pour over was actually really eye-opening for me and super, super fun. It actually motivates me to want to make a Chemex now, because the V60 was really beautiful, but Chemex has always been my favorite, and just showed me how refined my same coffee can be. It was great. It was really fun.
That's fun. Well, I'm glad you embraced the potential of it being awful and tried.
Right. So today we're going to cover, we're going to each do a player deep dive. We'll have a little waiver chatter like we do on Saturdays about players that might be available in a 15-team league. We'll have a little bit of minor league talk and then open forum. So who's your first player deep dive?
You want to do hitter or pitcher?
It's up to you.
All right. Well, let's do hitting.
Sure.
So what I did, I like to come up with something that to figure out who I want to talk about instead of just picking someone. So what I did was I looked at year-over-year improvers, top 20 improvers in the following categories: chase rate improvers, ground ball rate improvers, so lowering the ground ball rate, and hard hit rate, so increasing their hard hit rate. Actually didn't have any players that hit all 3 categories. However, I had 8 players who hit 2 of them. So Jose Abreu, Tyler Naquin, Yordan Alvarez, Kevin Kiermaier, and Michael A. Taylor, and then Colton Wong. So there were some names on there I wouldn't necessarily expect. I felt like we've talked about Abreu recently. No one needs to hear me analysis to know how great Yordan Alvarez is. The other were kind of interesting outfielders, and I chose to put Colton Wong in my waiver section. So I ended up looking at Christian Walker, who's the player that I currently roster in our dynasty league. So yes, I'm talking about a player I own. However, these improvements honestly are the reasons why that led me to him being on my roster. So for this season, he's for these metrics, he has a 6.6% improvement in his hard hit rate. This year, he's hitting the ball hard at a 47.7% hard hit rate, driven by a 16% barrel rate, 16.8. And then he was the 16th best improver in chase rate. So he's chasing rate. What I found was he's not just chasing less, he's swinging less overall. His chase rate overall is down 13%.
Wow.
But that the swinging less is really working well for him. I'm not going to quote his expected stats because there's some thoughts that I've heard that I think I give credence to in terms of the expected stats being a little skewed because of the ball being different. That we got to give a larger sample before we can lean into expected stats. So I'm trying to just change my analysis a little bit and wait a little bit longer before I lean on those too much. That being said, he's outperforming his expected stats. You look at his savant page, he's actually quite good in all the areas where he doesn't excel. He's in the mid 50s on whiff rate. With a power hitter, that's not to be unexpected. And his contact rate in the zone is 85%. He's actually improved a little bit there. So being more selective, really hitting the ball with the power, not chasing. His lineup spot, he's locked in the fourth spot, both righties and lefties locked in the fourth spot, cleanup spot. So for our league, that means RBIs. He already has 10 home runs. And like I said, if you look at his expected stats, that's on the low side. But kind of a player that you would look over the waiver list and the name is not going to attract you. But I came to him because of these skill improvements. And while the team context isn't great, I love the value of the lineup context. And the fact that he popped on this list and was someone who wasn't obviously good or someone we recently talked about was the reason I wanted to highlight what he's doing, because I think he's an interesting player for 2022 based on what he's doing. I think it's sustainable if he keeps doing these things because he's always had power. But his change in approach, which is something that we talk a lot about, something that we value, is really driving the improvement statistically. And that's fun to see.
Do you have faith in the Diamondbacks offense that he's going to be able to he'll have runners to drive in, hitting in that spot?
Yeah, I think, they've been surprisingly competitive. When I look at their lineup, Rojas just recently came back. They recalled up their number one prospect. I'm gonna say Garrett Cooper.
Alec Thomas.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the
Corbin Carroll.
Cooper Hummel.
Oh,
kind of a platoon bat. They brought him up. Dalton Varsho, like we talked about last show, is exceeding my expectations a little bit. Ketel Marte, who we both like a lot. So I don't think it's a deep lineup by any means, but I think the top half of it is good enough. And then the NL West, while there's some good pitching out there, there's also some good parks to hit in. Or Arizona plays neutral, maybe slightly favoring the pitcher a little bit, but yeah, I think there's enough talent in that lineup that having a number 4 hitter in that lineup I think that's something I had to mitigate my bias towards that, Tino. Honestly, I tend to kind of discount teams that I don't think are good too much. So it's kind of a sign of growth for me to even be willing to sheepishly put a Diamondback as in my first baseman. But I think teams that are good are not swayed by that. You want to incorporate it into your analysis, but I think in the past, I've leaned too much into that and limited the playing pool too much.
I think Christian Walker is a really great example of where, as a fantasy player, where you draw the line as far as association with team or past perception of who that player is, right? Because he's made significant changes, as you spelled out. And when you look at his savant page or you see the 10 home runs, you see opportunity for, probably a top 10 first baseman in fantasy at the end of 2022. But Christian Walker is not a name that you immediately jump to. And so he's one that will challenge name value and will challenge past perception of what an organization represents. He's a player that I've been aware of, but I think I'm on the other end of, I wish that I was different. I wish that I would allow my analysis to 100% dictate who's on my team, right? I think those teams can be very, very successful, but I don't, as you put it, I don't know that I would want to see Christian Walker as my starting first baseman, but what's the difference between seeing Christian Walker's name and seeing Brandon Belt's name, other than preferring to watch Giants games versus Diamondbacks games, right? It's to me, it almost comes down to that, but I think it's challenging those biases and challenging those thoughts is really important to become a better fantasy player.
Cool. Can I share a couple other names that pop on this list?
Sure.
Before we do your hitter. So the number one player who has decreased their chase rate was Will Smith. And I didn't think that was possible because he's already so discerning. I found that a little bit staggering. Can
I share a quick Will Smith story that I read today?
Yeah.
Or read yesterday.
Yeah.
So I'm reading a book about the Dodgers by Pedro Mora, and really fascinating book. I'm about halfway through. And there was a Will Smith story where it was during the Andrew Friedman chapter. But Andrew Friedman is such a fascinating dude. And he decided that what was best for Will Smith's development was, and he asked Major League Baseball for permission. It was the last year of Yasmani Grandal and on the Dodgers. And he asked Major League Baseball permission to have Will Smith do everything with the team other than be in the dugout and play, but not have him be on the roster for a time at the end of the season. I think it was like a month or so. So he prepared in meetings with catchers and coaches. He showed up to the ballpark at the same time as the active players did. He sat in meetings with pitchers. He did all the planning and all the thought process that would go into being a starting catcher, but he wasn't actively on the roster. And it was a way to acclimate him to Major League Baseball and get him, kind of essentially put him in like catcher university or something like that. But I just found it really fascinating. It's something that as a fan, I had never heard of, but I thought was a super, super cool idea. So that was a part of Will Smith's development, was to have him be with the team before he actually started playing with the Dodgers.
The other player I want to highlight is on the chase rate leaderboard is Shohei Ohtani. Big surprise, Aaron talking about Ohtani. But I think it was interesting, going back to the preseason, we talked about where could he improve? What would be the impact of him having Trout and Rendon in the lineup every day and that depth? I think seeing his name on that board surprised me, but in a good way, that he's being more patient and he's chasing less. Mm-hmm. He's probably getting less to hit, and he's taking it. So I thought that was interesting based on that conversation we had. For ground ball rate improvers, some names that popped for me were Jazz Chisholm. The season he's having, he's lifting the ball a lot more. And I feel like other than plate approach, the thing you and I probably talk about the most on the hitting side is launch angle and how important that is. So I think this list is interesting. Corey Seager was 5th. Bryce Harper is having a great year, is 8th. Alex Bregman kind of returning 9. Brian Hayes 11. And Tyler Stevenson 16. All those guys are lifting the ball more. Colton Wong is number 20 on that list. And then lastly, and then I'll pass it to you for hitting, is hard hit rate improvers. Some names that popped were Gene Sakura at number 4, who's on my team. Tommy Pham, who's on your team, at number 7. Wilson Contreras, another guy on your team, at number 9. And 10 through 20, Christian Walker, like says, on that list. It was an interesting list. A lot of our guys that we like and the roster popped on there, and that was fun to see.
Thanks for those lists. That's there's some confirmation in there, and it's always interesting to sort in that way. I do think about how, launch angle is something that we talk about quite a bit, and it's a stat that can be very telling, especially on the extreme ends. Mm-hmm. One thing I have started thinking about though is with the ball being, somewhat less lively than it's been in previous years. At least those are the thoughts or allegations. Could the optimal launch angle offensively be shifting down? Right. So if you have a player with what was considered to be an optimal launch angle, right, 15 to 20% or 15 to 20 degrees, essentially. If you're a player that doesn't have elite power, right, is that still the optimal launch angle? So because the ball is a little bit more dead, I think about Colton Wong as an example of someone whose launch angle is increased. He's hit for some power this year, but he's also pretty fast. And I think if he adjusted his approach a little, would be a much higher average hitter. Is it worth it for Colton Wong to have what was considered historically optimal launch angle? Or is he more valuable as both a fantasy player and a player for the Brewers, hitting more line drives, knowing that some of the balls he was going to hit previously that went out of the park were now going to be warning track fly balls? It's just something to think about. I'm starting to look, at least for the players with, say, average to below average power, I'm starting to look for maybe a lower launch angle as predictive of being a better offensive player, at least in 2022. But just some food for thought. I found that thought bubble pretty interesting.
Yeah, had an article this week about guys who improve their line drive rate. As guys who are excelling based on their hard hit metric, and also a line drive type launch angle instead of an extreme fly ball launch angle. Margot was on that list, as was Jean Segura. I haven't finished the article, but
awesome. So my player deep dive was Bo Bichette. I wanted to know what was going on with Bo Bichette.
Can I just enjoy that he struggles? Do I have to analyze it?
I'm rooting for him.
Half the podcast is rooting for him, at least.
Right. It's just not a profile that I get super excited about. Of course, I roster Byron Buxton, but I think he's a different type of player. Anyways, Bo Bichette, 6 foot, 185. He's 24 years old. He was picked in the second round, 66th overall by Toronto in 2016. He'll be a free agent in 2026. As most know, at least those our age, he's the son of Dante Bichette. He grew up in Florida. He committed to Arizona State University, which was a college baseball factory. Who he was named after?
Bo, I know he plays tennis. I don't.
Bo Jackson. So Bo Bichette,
I mean, that was the first Bo that came to my mind, but I thought surely not.
Too obvious. And then two other interesting facts. He played for Brazil in the World Baseball Classic because his mother is a native of Brazil, and his maternal grandfather is Chinese, which I found interesting as well. So Bo Bichette in 2021, as we all know, at age 23, had a triple slash of 298, 343, and an OPS of 828. He had 29 home runs, 121 runs, 102 RBIs, and 25 steals. So you look at that as a 23-year-old in Toronto, in that Toronto lineup, hitting high in that lineup, 100 plus runs, 100 plus RBIs, 25. Awesome. He was going as high as mid first round, I think, in some drafts, definitely low first round.
His ADP was 5, 6, 7, something like that. Yeah.
So obviously highly valued player. So far this year, in 170 plate appearances, he has 17 runs, 4 homers, 17 RBIs, 4 steals, and a triple slash of 242, 282, 648. So sub 700 OPS, sub 300 OBP. So what's going on? His walk rate is slightly down. His K rate is up about 5%. His launch angle is the same. So he's hitting the ball similarly to how he has, but his ground ball rate is all the way up to 50.4% this year. And his fly ball rate is down about 4%. But really what's going on is his swing. His contact rate is down 3.5%, and his swinging strike rate is up from 11.6% to 13.7%. Finally, his first pitch swing rate is up from 46.2% to 50%. So basically and he's third percentile for chase rate for hitters. So it was already a risky profile in that he doesn't draw walks and he's not real selective with his swings, but which tends to lead to a more volatile profile because you're leaning on BABIP and some of the other kind of batted ball things, which can go up and down based on luck, which is partly why that approach is a little bit scary for both of us to roster. But when that approach goes bad, or when you start chasing too much without the contact, then your whole stat line goes downhill very, very quickly. So he's chasing too much. The power's still there. I think that a bit more selectivity would really kind of normalize him for his talent and allow him to continue to produce the way he did last year. But what I think about when I think about this profile and what he's doing is that I don't know how much upside there is on his season or on his 2021 season with this type of approach, especially in today's game. So I have this kind of bad news for Bo Bichette owners or people who drafted him in the first round. I don't think he's ever necessarily going to be the player that we thought he was going to be, or some thought he was going to be heading into this season. I still think he'll settle in as a probably 25 homer, 15 to 20 steal guy, but his average, his OBP and his OPS are going to wax and wane with luck and are mostly dependent on whether he becomes a more selective hitter as he gets older. Do you have any thoughts on what I shared about Bo Bichette?
What I would wonder is the selectivity and the plate approach, is that by him changing that, does that change what makes him good? You know, for him, you know what I mean? Like, that's his values. Like he swings like, makes a lot of contact. His contact ability is plus. His bat the ball is plus. If he swings less, is he going to lose some aggressiveness? Is he going to take away his edge? I don't know the answer to that. I'm thinking out loud.
Right. I don't think it's an off-on thing. I think he's what I'm getting at is more that he gets back to the approach that provided him success last year. I don't expect him to become, a 15% walk rate type of guy. I think that's, to your point, taking away his aggressiveness is taking away what makes him great. Mm-hmm. But I do think that when your K rate is up and your walk rate is down and you're topping everything and your first pitch swing rate is up, all those things over what made him successful last year, I'm just saying let's kind of bring it back to what the approach was last year, not swing the pendulum all the way the other way. But your point is well taken. You take aggressiveness away from an aggressive hitter and all of a sudden they become passive and not very good. I think someone was making that argument about Jazz Chisholm, that his walk rate's never going to be great, but his aggressiveness is and hitting the ball early in the count and not getting down to 2 strikes is what's helping him perform the way he is this season. Who's your pitcher?
Staying on the Blue Jays, my pitcher is Kevin Gausman. A little quick background. So for this exercise, I did something similar. I looked at fastball velocity improvers, walk rate improvers, and ground ball percentage improvers. I didn't really have pitchers that hit across that list. You add in relievers, there were none, but Alex Cobb did pop on the list. He was 5th in fastball velocity and 13th in ground ball improvement. However, you detailed him last week pretty well, or very well. So I didn't want to revisit him, but I think it's a reminder of what he's doing. Another player who popped on the list is a reliever for the Twins. Big surprise, Aaron talking about a reliever, but I'm going to actually add him to my waiver conversation. So Gausman, the reason I wanted to talk about him was 2 reasons. We just talked about, challenging landscape in terms of pitching and changes. Gausman is 3-3 record-wise. He has 3 losses and 3 wins despite pitching really well. And then he was the 18th best walk rate improver on this list. And I already thought of Gausman as someone who had really good command. So the fact that he improved on this to that degree against the field was kind of cool and kind of surprising, honestly. So looking at what he's done so far, he's really been fantastic. 3-3, like I said, a 2.5 ERA in 50 innings, 57 strikeouts, and just over a 1 WHIP. His splitter is, a dominant pitch. I looked at swings and misses on the splitter. He has 77 of those events. Alex Cobb has 36 and Montas has 36. No one else in the majors has anything more than 30. So he basically doubled Montas and Cobb. So we know his splitter already has a -8 run value, but his four seam also has a negative run value. He's throwing the slider more than he ever has, and it's a good pitch for him. He's getting 23% K rate on it. And so I honestly didn't realize that he had a third pitch he was using 12% of the time. But he's really primarily that four seam split. And we had that conversation last week. It was fresh on my mind of 2-pitch guys adding a third pitch. And Gosman is a guy who's developed that third pitch enough where his dominant pitch, that split finger, can carry the load. And that's something else we talked about last week, is when we're scouting for pitchers and looking for breakouts, having a guy who has either, that plus command or a dominant pitch or something to carry the day for him as he develops. So, he's obviously excelling. I think he would be the front runner for AL Cy Young if voting was today. Yeah, his ability to get guys to chase that splitter, he's in the 100th percentile in chase rate. His ability to make that look like a strike until it gets to the plate before it falls off. And then, that walk rate is at 1.5% right now. So he's not giving in to anybody, throwing strikes. So that's something I always value and always enjoy. Yeah, so he's been quite dominant so far.
So I pulled up my Gossman profile heading into this season from the blog, and his splitter was the #1 split finger pitch in baseball last year by run value, and the #3 pitch overall. So as you put, it's an elite pitch, plus pitch. And then his fastball, which he threw 52.7% of the time last year, was the #32 fastball overall in baseball. So he's got in his #32 fastball, #89 pitch overall. So he had 2 of the top 100 rated pitches in baseball. So interestingly, if we're done with Gosman, my pitcher has really similar statistics, but you would never think of him as at the level of Kevin Gosman. So the pitcher I'm going to talk about is 3-2 with a 2.50 ERA.
What was the ERA again?
2.50.
2.50. Okay.
So Gosman is 3-3 with a 2.52.
Mm-hmm.
This pitcher is 3-2 with a 2.50. Gosman's ERA is 1.04, or WHIP is 1.04. This pitcher's WHIP is 1.08. Gosman has struck out 57 in 50 innings. This pitcher has struck out 45 in 39.2 innings. Do you have any guesses? I know this is a needle in a haystack. Any guesses as to who I'm talking about?
Is this someone that we've talked about at all, or is this someone completely new?
A little bit. It's pretty new, but a little bit. You don't have to guess. I'm happy to tell you.
I'm guessing this is Martin Perez for the Rangers.
It's not.
No.
It's not.
Okay.
It's Tarek Skubal.
Oh, okay.
So Tarek Skubal, little background, 6'3", 240. He's 25 years old. He was picked 9th overall by the Detroit Tigers. Grew up in Arizona. He actually played baseball at Seattle University. Shout out, Matt. Last year, he was 8-12 with a 4.34 ERA and a 1.26 WHIP. He was a pitcher that I targeted based on some of the underlying metrics coming into this year. I tried to trade for him unsuccessfully. But this year, some of his successes are that his K minus BB this year is 23.3%, which is up from 18.5, but it's above that 20% threshold that you and I talk about. He's got a walk rate of 5% this year, which is really, really great, and a K rate of 28.3%. One of the big statistical shifts is that his ground ball rate has increased almost 10%. So he's now at 48% ground ball rate, which is starting to get closer to elite. So he's got the strikeouts and the ground balls like we talked about. He's also pitching in Detroit, which is a very much a hitter or a pitcher's park. Swinging strike rate is up 1.2%. But he's a pitcher who has always had the talent, obviously the pedigree with his draft status. And we just kind of were waiting for him to put it all together. I don't know that we would have pegged Skubal to be the most successful pitcher out of Skubal, Casey Mize, and Matt Manning, as those three were coming through the system. But I definitely think at this point it's without argument that he's the best pitcher of those three. So why is his ground ball rate way up and why is his line drive down? He's throwing his four-seam fastball 13.9% less than he did last year. And he's throwing his sinker and slider a lot more. He also increased his velocity on his slider a bit. So it's got less movement, but it's become a better pitch because it's with more velocity. So he's turned into a sinker slider pitcher, but one which is not the type of pitcher that we see all the time nowadays, but he is he's striking out more with those pitches. So Skubal, if he would be an incredible buy right now. I think he's going to get a lot more publicity and shine in the next couple of months if he continues to perform at this level. But if you can get Skubal right now, even if you're paying more than what the perceived market is, I think he would be a very, very good pitcher to invest in as a mainstay on your roster. Have you watched Skubal at all this year?
Yes, I saw when he was pitching against the A's.
What was your takeaway watching him?
I mean, he looked good, but he didn't look dominant. It wasn't one of those things where it really popped when I was watching him live. But he pitched well. He seemed in command. Times I had watched him the previous year, I actually watched him against the Guardians twice. He got hit really hard both times. The thing that I see that surprises me is his fastball went from a nine run value in a negative way to a -1, and its usage is just way down. So I mean that's and so as a result, his hard hit rate and his X slug is way down.
Right.
That was the thing that worried me. Is I knew he had swing and miss stuff, but he just seemed to get hit so hard. His hard hit rate was very high, and it seemed a lot to do with that fastball and his inability to command the secondaries made guys just sit on that fastball. Looking at the heat map this year, he's consistently locating it high in the zone. So he's keeping it out of the middle of the plate. He's keeping it up, using it less, and his command has improved. That 4.5% walk rate. So yeah, he definitely seems like he's made the necessary improvements. And his changeup is everything we talked about consistently. His ability to have a plus changeup to get right-handers out as a left-handed starter is important. His changeup has a -1 run value and has plus vertical movement and plus horizontal movement. So that's a pitch that should keep him competitive against both sides of the plate. So yeah, this looks, honestly, I haven't looked at him closely because the Tigers have been so disappointing, but it seems like he's really growing.
His pitch mix is also, he's changed his pitch mix quite a bit. Less fastball, more slider, more curveball, more changeup. Slider is, I don't know enough to know whether he's tunneling better or anything like that. But if his slider and his fastball are coming out of the same place and he's throwing that slider more, that would also really, really help a lot. And interestingly, his left on base percentage is, let's see, I had it down here. No, that wasn't it. But his BABIP currently is 319, and his left on base percentage is lower than it was last year. It's about league average, but it's still lower than last year. But his BABIP is pretty high. So I think just being very rudimentary with BABIP, there's some room for improvement there. He is getting more ground balls, so you'd expect it to go up, but not necessarily all the way up to 319. But again, Skubal for me is a pitcher, even at first glance now, is worth trying to trade for. And I would consider giving up quite a bit to acquire him if I could. So we'll take a quick break. We'll come back with some waiver thoughts, maybe a little bit of minor league talk, and then end it with open forum and some baseball cards. Welcome back. Aaron and I will now cover 3 players that we think might be available on the waiver wire in a 15-team league. What you got, Aaron?
Yeah, so using the research I did for my highlighted pitcher and hitter, I want to highlight 3 players who popped on that list. My first hitter is Anthony Santander. Bats at 3-4 spot for the Orioles. Santander is a switch hitter. He was number 19 on the chase rate improvers on my list, and he's walking into a 12.8% clip. Santander has always had good pop in his bat. However, his lack of selectivity and his chase has kind of held him back from capping that potential. But this year, his plate discipline is really improved, and that's why he's seeing that double-digit walk rate. His slash line right now is 234, 354, 423, the 777 OPS, 7 home runs, 18 runs, 21 RBI. You're not getting any speed from Santander, but I really like this adjustment in his plate approach. And the fact that he's a switch hitter means he can take advantage of right field in Orioles ballpark despite the adjustment. His max EV consistently in the low 112s, 111s. His barrel rate this year is 9.4. That's consistent with the last 3 years. He's been 10.2, 8.4, 9.4. So I think the pop is for real. I think he's shown that. I love the improvement in plate approach. He's someone I consider adding in a 5 outfielder league. My second hitter is Colton Wong. We've talked about quite a bit. Colton was number 4 in chase rate improvers on my list today, and he was number 20 in ground ball rate improvers. So he's lifting the ball better than he has. Colton is slashing 238, 317, 405 for a 722 OPS. Had quite a slow start, just come on of late. He's also popped 8 steals, despite a 27 percentile sprint speed. So I think he just owns that skill of stealing. So I'm not that worried about his savant sprint speed here. But yeah, he's pretty firm at the top of that lineup. He was moved down when he was struggling by council, but he is back at the top of the lineup and has been consistently now. And so I like that lineup. I like that he bats the top. I love getting the speed. Like you said, he's lifting the ball more. So you're getting a little less pop, but you're getting speed. And I've always loved Wong as a player. I'm gonna suggest adding him as a second baseman if he was available, or considering him, but depending on your team and what you needed. My last player I want to highlight is Griffin Jax, reliever for the Twins. For those who subscribe to The Athletic, I really recommend going and reading Aaron Gleeman's article about him. It's really interesting and also has some great video of some of the movement on his pitches, especially his slider. It was really eye-popping. So Griffin was number 4 on my fastball velocity improvers, which is not terribly surprising given he went from a starter last year to a reliever. We often see that kind of bump. But he also was the number 19 in ground ball rate improver. So he's keeping the ball on the ground more. So far this year, he has the 3rd best WPA, or win probability added, in the Minnesota bullpen. So he's being used both as a follower, not as a traditional follower. He goes multi innings, but the first guy to pitch after a short start. He comes in that 5th, 6th inning to get key outs against the middle of the lineup. He also has had some leverage innings at the end of the game. So he's being used by the skipper in Minnesota in multiple leverage roles and is succeeding. His slider is really his swing and miss pitch. Again, I recommend checking out video of that. So far this year, he's posted a 2.95 ERA, 18 innings pitched, 21 strikeouts, and a 1.25 whip. If you look at his savant page, he's up there in whiff rate, his fastball spin, his velocity's improved. So as we've talked about on theme, guys who are versatile, who can help you in multiple categories. I like what I'm seeing from him in terms of pitch mix and having an out pitch and a slider as a reliever. And he has that. So he's someone I would look at. And honestly, I wouldn't even rule out him getting saves. Pagan continues to scuffle. He gets saves, but he literally is on the tightrope every single time. I think eventually there's a chance they take him out of that role. And they've also shown that they want to keep, they're going to be careful with Duran. They're not going to use him on back-to-back days. They're going to use him for multiple innings where they think that they need that out of him to try to get a win. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Jax get a save opportunity or two, in addition to holds and wins potentially. So interesting pitcher.
Nice. Yeah, the movement on his slider is pretty wild. It's pitching ninja worthy for sure. My first hitter is Avisail Garcia, free agent signing of the Marlins this year. He's still hitting in the middle of the Marlins lineup. This would be a buy low for sure. I'm sure there's some leagues where he's still rostered given what he produced last year. Last year, he had 29 home runs, 8 steals, and an 820 OPS, which is certainly good as your outfield 3. And I guess if you had to, you could almost make him an outfield 2 with those stats. This year, in 132 plate appearances, he's hitting .213 with a .242 on base and a .549 OPS. He's got 3 home runs and 3 steals, but his walk rate is 2.3% and his K rate is 28%, which is obviously not good. His launch angle is all the way down to 3.9 degrees. Last year, it was 9.3 degrees, which is still not optimal, but he's just hitting the ball. 50% of the time he's hitting the ball on the ground. The other alarming stat is that his swinging strike rate is up from 18.3% last year all the way to 23.4% this year. So he swings and misses about a quarter of the time that he swings, which is not good. That said, he's Savant reads that he's a 99th percentile max exit, 70th percentile hard hit, and 68th percentile barrel. So while he's chasing too much and he's hitting too many ground balls, when he does hit the ball in the air, he's hitting it hard. The reason why he's an ad for me is that the track record is there for him to be a very valuable player on your fantasy team. I would like him less, I think, real life if he was a Mariners outfielder, as an example. But fantasy-wise, he should be good for close to 10 steals and 25 home runs. And he's a major league veteran. So it's probably a simple tweak to get him to get back to hitting the ball a little bit more in the air, or at least hitting line drives. But the physicality, he's a very physical player. The physicality of his play is still there, as exemplified in his max EV and his hard hit. So Avisail Garcia is one that I would, if you were a believer in him before, I wouldn't shy away from adding him and maybe stashing him on the bench or playing him in favorable matchups until he can work it out. But I'm pretty confident that he'll get to a place where he's working it out and he's back to being an outfield 3 fantasy wise. Second hitter, I was actually really surprised by. I only picked him because he was pretty high up in our Fantrax waiver list. It's Hunter Dozier. So Hunter Dozier is a corner infield player for the Royals. Currently in Fantrax, he has first base, third base, and outfield eligibility. Sounds like an application for your team, Aaron. In 2021, he had 16 home runs and an OPS of 680, which is obviously suboptimal. He did it in 500 plus plate appearances. So far this year, in 133 plate appearances, he has a triple slash of 288, 331, an OPS of 803, 16 runs, 11 ribbies, and 1 steal. But he's made some major adjustments to his game. So his swinging strike rate is down over 1%, and it's down to 13.7%, which is not a bad place to be for a hitter with power. His Savant metrics, his max EV is 76 percentile. His barrel is 83rd percentile. So he's barreling up a lot of pitches this season. The most interesting thing is that he is pulling the ball 12% more than he did last year. So he's obviously made an adjustment to try to yank the ball out to left field. But he's also striking out a lot less. His K rate is down from 28.4% last year to 21.8% this year. So almost a 7% reduction in K percentage. So if you put it all together, He's got a 17-degree launch angle, so pretty optimal launch angle. He's pulling the ball to left field a ton more than he did last year, and he's striking out a lot less. All of those things kind of add up to it's like the Justin Turner story in some ways, right? Where he's getting out in front of the ball and he's seeing the ball better. Are these improvements going to stick? I would say that this is a very obvious case of someone who's made very conscious changes to his swing and to his approach. And so it would not surprise me to see these changes last. And so if you can get on the wire currently an 800 plus OPS player with corner infield eligibility and outfield eligibility, I think he's a really, really good bench bat, and someone that if you have a hole at first or third, I would consider picking up and plugging in as a starter right away. I was very surprised to see that from Hunter Dozier because I don't think of him as this type of player. The last player on my list is Zach Eflin. He's a player that we've, amongst friends in a text thread, have joked about quite a bit. But digging a little deeper into him, he's quite an effective pitcher. He's a pitcher from a different era in that he's primarily, or his pitch that he throws the most is a sinker. And it's a really a sinker with a lot of movement, a lot of horizontal movement. So this year in 30 innings, he's 1-3 with a 3.90 ERA and a 1.20 WHIP. He doesn't strike out many, so he's definitely fantasy-wise a back end of the rotation sort of starting pitcher. He only at 18.4% K rate, so he's getting a ton of ground balls. But interestingly, he is only surrendering a 4.2% barrel currently, which is good for the 85th percentile in baseball. And his savant metrics are super interesting. So 99th percentile average exit velocity yielded, 96th hard hit, and as I stated before, 85th barrel. So it's really, really, really hard to hit the ball hard against Eflin. And his walk rate percentile is 89th. So he's not walking anyone, and you're not hitting the ball very hard against him. What I found most fascinating about him, besides the fact that he's kind of your old school 4-pitch guy, sinker, cutter, curveball, 4-seam, even his changeup he throws 9.7% of the time, is it's obvious that the Phillies with Kyle Gibson, Ranger Suarez, and Zach Eflin are looking for ground ball pitchers in what is a very hitter friendly Citizens Bank ballpark, right? Because they're all sinker ballers, but their defense is atrocious. So typically when you would couple a very, very good infield defense with the sinker ball staff, and yet their infield defense is Alec Boehm, who is, much better at first base than he is at third, and very challenged range wise. Whoever they decide to roll out at short, currently it's Johan Camargo, who's never been a shortstop in his major league career. Gene Segura, who is a consistent second baseman, but without range anymore, and his build doesn't really allow him to have a ton of range, and Rhys Hoskins. And these guys play pretty much every day at their respective positions. So in my mind, Eflin might be an even better pitcher than he's performed this season. And I would say the same thing for the other two that I named, because the home park is horrible and the infield defense is horrible. And still he has an ERA under 4, and he's incredibly difficult to barrel. One stat to add with Eflin that is even more reason for encouragement is that his left on base percentage currently is 59%. So he's allowing a much higher number of runners to score than league average, and we can typically expect that number to level out a bit over the course of the season. So Eflin is, go ahead.
Probably because he's leaving guys on base and the bullpen's letting them in.
Well, there's that. Yes, their bullpen is horrible. Also, he gives up a ton of ground balls, and if you have an infield defense with that's really shitty, you're allowing those runners to score too because the balls are getting through. But I found him interesting. He's not going to add to your
Well,
K.
to look at his heat maps, man, because his walk rate is 4%, and last year it was 3.6, and then before that it was 6.1. So you can't say it's fluky. But if
No,
you look at his heat maps, he doesn't do anything in the middle, and that portends to the inability to square him up. He's not giving guys anything in the middle of the plate. You know what I mean? Like everything is on the edges, and despite that, his command is
still very good.
He's not
Right.
walking people.
So
So
what would you do? What would you do with your roster with the pitcher like this? Not your specific roster, but how do you approach a pitcher who doesn't satisfy the K requirement that you might look for from a starter, pitches in a really scary park with a scary defense, but is still putting up statistics that appear to be, worthy of rostering? Again, it's the same discussion that we had earlier about perception versus what can actually help your team. But what are your thoughts on that?
I think he would be. I'm looking at his innings pitch, because to me, if he was giving you volume, he might volume himself away to a few more Ks. Just missing the first two starts. He's went 5 2/3, 6, 4 1/3, but he gave up 8 hits and 5 earned runs. They took him out, and then six innings. I don't know. I'd want to see maybe a few more innings to be comfortable with that. But yeah, I think taking team context and defense into it might be a tipping factor. Whereas if you played in a bigger ballpark with a better infield, maybe that might tip me to take someone who had less swing and miss on a fantasy team.
So I just pulled up some of his yearly stats, and I found it interesting that his ERA since 2018 in order from 18 to 22 is 4.36, 4.13, 3.97, 4.17, 3.90. And his whip has gone down progressively over that time, which I assume is, it looks like it has some to do with a reduction in hits, but mostly it's about about walks. So, so he is who, not to be corny, but he is who we think he is. In that he's a right around a 4 ERA pitcher who is not going to strike a ton of batters out. And he's borderline. If you have pitchers who are hurt, right? If I didn't have depth and Scherzer got hurt, he's someone that I might pick up to supplement at least for a while. Not a superstar, but just an interesting pitcher. He's actually someone that I want to watch pitch a game to see how he works the edges of the plate. This would be a fun watch for me.
Yeah, he definitely works the edges. That's remarkable. I've never seen heat maps like that, where there's nothing in the middle.
Right.
By the way, the committee reviewed Hunter Dozier's application to my team, and it was denied.
Oh yeah?
Based on 33% chase rate. So, grounds for denial. And anytime you drop a suboptimal in your analysis, it's always my favorite.
Right. That's funny. So we were going to talk some prospects here. I've got a list of my top 10 that are in the minors right now, but I just want to highlight a couple that I found really interesting. Also, it's Happy Adley Rutschman Day.
Yes, heck yes. It's about time.
Should be awesome. Although there was one thing that I saw with Rutschman that I didn't like, is that he's going to wear number 35. And it's not that I don't like it because it was Mike Mussina's number, although I think they should retire his number. It's more that to me, it's kind of an ugly number on the back of a jersey in general. I think there's a lot more fun numbers that Rutschman could have worn. I would have loved to see him single digit, but that's just me. So Rutschman debuts today. I'll just go through what I have as my top 5 currently. It's Rutschman 1, CJ Abram 2, even though he struggled in his first go around in the major leagues, and he's scuffling right now, but I think he's probably just disappointed to be sent down. 3, to no surprise, is Noelvi Marte. 4 is Jordan Walker, and 5, O'Neal Cruz. And then once those guys come off, I've got a ton of pitchers behind them, starting with Daniel Espino as number 1 and Grayson Rodriguez 2. Any egregious?
Rodriguez, that's great.
I do. I do. I think it's hard to ignore. I know how great Grayson is, but it's hard to ignore a 51.5% K rate and only a 5.9% walk rate in AA as a 21-year-old. I think Espino is dynamite. And really the tipping point, I know Grayson's changeup and his pitch and having 4 pitches and all those things is great, but the tipping point for me is, while I know that Baltimore has changed its approach with its pitching prospects, I still am waiting to see that pan out with an elite pitcher, whereas Espino is in what is considered, I think, probably a top 3 pitching organization in baseball, maybe top 5, but definitely top 5, maybe top 3.
I agree.
And then of the prospects mentioned, I think part of why I have Marte so high is I've followed him for quite a long time, and you see his progression and his learning curve a little bit more up close if you follow that particular team. And he's getting big. He's a shortstop currently, but he's getting bigger and stronger, which is potentially leading to more power. I think he's a future third baseman. And he's listed at 6'1", 181, but seeing him in spring training, he looks closer to 210. So for me, he's a slugging third baseman. And I think that overall, the scouting outlets have had his hit tool a little bit lower than where it should be. I think he's better than a 45 hit tool, which is what Fangraphs gave him. But he's going to hit for power and hit for speed as well. And currently carrying a 12% walk rate in high A, which is good as a 20-year-old.
Is he a high A?
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then Jordan Walker, who I don't think we've talked about a ton, is 19-year-old.
Recently, but not as in depth.
19-year-old third base prospect for the Cardinals. He's currently in AA as a 19-year-old. I think he and Yuri Perez are the 2 19-year-olds in AA currently, correct?
Yeah.
So in 152 plate appearances thus far, his triple slash is 315, 414, 918. And he's added 10 steals. And then take into account the fact that at 19 in AA, he's got a 12.5% walk rate and a 23% K rate. I expect to see him squarely in the top 10 in most midseason updates. And the only question about him for me currently is what position is he going to play? Because unless Arenado opts out this year, which he has an opt-out opportunity, he's going to be at third for a few more years for the Cardinals. I could see them putting Walker at first, actually, because he is 6'5". But it was fun for me to revisit some of those like prospect lists and see who's performing this year. And I try not to value a small sample of 150 plate appearances too much, but those are some of the minor leaguers that I'm most excited about. I do have Corbin Carroll at 7 for those who might think that I forgot about him. Again, it might be an organizational bias, but I do worry a little bit about the Diamondbacks' ability to develop players. And he also was really rail thin, and as a high schooler, I should root for him because he's a Seattle kid. But we'll see Corbin Carroll probably I'm guessing as the number 1 prospect with the midseason lists that come out.
Yeah, James Anderson has his top 400 update coming out next week. I'm super eager to see. He's my kind of go-to. He's my Saris of
prospects.
Yeah.
Nice, awesome.
So,
open forum, unless you have some minor league stuff.
I don't. I was share your excitement to see Hadley up, and I hope O'Neill Cruz is not too far behind. These guys that are close to the majors, I'm ready to see them come up and start the learning curve, so they can.
This is happy Matt Liberatore day for me too.
Oh, he's pitching. I knew he was pitching this weekend. I didn't know if it was today.
Yeah, he's pitching against the Pirates in Pittsburgh today. He's one who I don't know if we talked about him on the pod, but I think he's more valuable because of context. So the opposite of Eflin, where Eflin has a short porch and a bad infield defense. Liberatore has a great infield defense and a big park to pitch in, which I think will help his numbers. So my Max Scherzer replacement, Matt Liberatore, I'm excited to see. Open forum. You got a question?
I don't have my cards ready though.
Awesome. I do have a question for you, which is, what's your first baseball memory? First Major League Baseball memory?
First Major League Baseball memory. Watching the A's and Giants World Series when they had the earthquake.
In 89?
Mhm.
Wow. That was pretty traumatic. Do you remember how you reacted to it?
I just remember Al Michaels' voice, like it was like shaking.
Mhm.
And just watching, like I really love like Dave Stewart on the A's, and I think we talked about like Kevin Mitchell and who was the real red ass on the Giants.
Matt Williams.
Yeah,
Mhm. And Will Clark too.
and Jeff Kent.
Oh,
Yeah.
Jeff Kent.
No,
Yeah.
that was later. That was in the 90s.
Kent was
Didn't
later.
Bonds like punch Jeff Kent a couple times?
Yes, Kent was later, but yeah, Will Clark.
Yeah, I'm getting that mixed up.
That was it was Kurt Manwaring, Will Clark, Robbie Thompson, Matt Williams, Jose Uribe, Kevin Mitchell. I can't get the other two outfielders, I don't think. Jeffrey Leonard was there until he got traded to the Mariners, but that was pre-89. Rick Russell, Don Robinson, Ali Hammaker, Craig Lefferts. Was Craig Lefferts a Padre? Anyways, just being silly. Those childhood rosters I remember really well. So my first memory is watching the Red Sox Mets 86 World Series. I was trying to rack my brain for a memory earlier than that, but I don't have I don't have a strong one of watching baseball prior to that, but that's the first series I remember sitting down in front of the TV and wanting to watch. And then my Mariners memories start right around then with, Phil Bradley and Jim Presley and all the horrendous Mariners teams that played in the Kingdome. But it just popped into my head. I was reading something about the Mets and it recalled the Mets Red Sox. And so that's why I wanted to ask the question, what your first memory was.
Yeah.
Ooh, you want to open first or me?
You go ahead.
All right. So I again have a pack of 2022 Series 1 tops. Let's see what we have here. Oh man, that's a bad omen. Not my favorite player in the world is my first card. You see?
I see 24.
Kurt Suzuki.
Kurt Suzuki.
Do not like him for reasons that we will not talk about. Brian De La Cruz, very ominous start. Lourdes Gurriel. None of these players yet do I like as players. There we go. There's one. Brandon Marsh.
Oh, nice.
Little fourth outfielder, Jake Myers. Oh my goodness, this is like the worst pack ever. I got a Topps All Rookie Team card, but it's Patrick Wisdom. He of the incredibly high strikeout rate.
30,
oh 30 could it get worse? Check it out. Eric Hosmer.
He was cut last night in our Dynasty League.
I saw that.
Guess his hot streak is over.
Mike Moustakas. This pack is bad. I bet you there's a great card.
A little bit.
Bet you there's a great card at the end.
Didn't you have Moustakas for a minute?
I drafted him, yes.
Okay.
He's starting to get hot, yeah.
Yeah, he was starting more up.
My least favorite Mariner, well, besides Flexen, my least favorite Mariner starter, Marco Gonzalez. Failed prospect, Brady Singer. Okay, there's a star. Juan Soto.
Yeah, there you go.
Number 55 on the Dodgers last year, Albert Pujols. Oh my goodness. Little baby shark.
Gerardo Parra.
Jorge Alfaro. I have not seen this card before. This is interesting. This is it's a scratch. I have to scratch it off. Home run challenge, pick the game, call your shot, Christian Yelich. I have no idea what that means, but
that's a lot of words.
I am going to scratch off the back at some point in time. It has a little scratch area. So I'll dig into that later. And a Stars of MLB 5'9", Jose Ramirez.
He looks mad every time he hits a home run.
He's funny. I like how frustrated how competitive he is and how frustrated he gets when he doesn't get a hit.
Yeah.
He's made himself into a top 5 player. It's pretty awesome.
He was on the list of ground ball rate improvers.
Really?
I was surprised to see that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I have another opening day.
Mm-hmm.
And mine only has 7 cards. Austin Riley.
Not a favorite of either of us heading into the season.
No. Odd that they have him running. I was one swinging. I can't. This happens to us all the time. Pack break wisdom. How do we get the same card? 2 different packs, same day. Anthony Bender.
Oof.
That's one of the cooler horizontal cards I've seen from a layout perspective.
Mm-hmm.
He's
Bit of
having
a
a
bust
rough
this year,
year.
though, yeah.
Yes. This is odd. That's like this has like perforations in it, like 3 players in one, and they make mini cards.
Huh. Who are the players?
They're all Dodgers. You got Kershaw, Betts, and Bellinger.
Ah.
Laura wants that. Your fingers are on my camera. Split it. Rotten.
It's got belly.
Jack Flaherty.
He's
Happy trails, friend.
frustrating pitcher for me to roster for a couple years.
All right, a couple young players that I don't think you're gonna be excited about. Jonathan India.
Mm-hmm.
That's a cool looking card.
12 homers, 12 steals. Jonathan India.
Yep. I'd take it as second base. Just saying. Not that I need more reds on my team because I don't.
Colton Wong's almost there.
All right, and then future stars, Alec Baum,
Cool.
and in that
Old school.
dusty blue.
That I said that last time. That uniform is so cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love that uniform.
I think you called it ice, which I'd never heard of before, but I thought it was
Ice,
cool.
man, drip.
Did I? No, I called it cold.
Cold.
I said that's a cold
Sorry, I
uniform.
took it to another level. Yeah,
All right,
I don't know
man.
what's I don't know what to think about Bohm. We talked about him in the preseason. He's hitting the crap out of the ball. He's only made 2 errors this month. I don't know. I don't know what to think.
I inquired trading for him for a quick second until Moncada got back, but I'm over it.
Yeah.
I'm glad I didn't give up any draft capital for him. What are you watching today?
That's a good question. The game I really want to see, Musgrove versus Rodon, is on during the day. So honestly, I'm probably going to try to stay away from my phone and rewatch that.
Nice.
That's really what I want to see. But I have a very condensed next 24 hours. So
Yeah.
If I can have any baseball time, that'll be a win. We'll connect offline.
Cool.
About that. It's not good pod content, but yeah, I have a very busy day. Culminated though, my Jackson graduated from high school. So shout out Jackson.
Congrats, man. That's awesome.
He graduates tomorrow, number 2 out of high school or finishing high school. So
Nice.
excited for him and excited to be there.
Right on. Yeah, Padres, Giants, Rodon versus Musgrove at 1. I'm going to be busy, but I'll try to catch as much of the Liberatore start against the Pirates. That's at 3:30.
Lefty and Pirates, you know what that means. Cabrine leads off.
I know exactly what that means. That means Cabrine and Brian Reynolds. And then I'll probably catch some of Chris Flexen giving up 3 home runs to Trevor Story against the Red Sox at 4. It's been a disappointing series thus far for the Mariners. Interesting though, Robbie Ray continues to strike people out even though he's not pitching very well. So yeah. Lots of baseball today, lots of baseball tomorrow. I'm loving that Peacock 8:30 game.
Yep.
Super, super cool. Cool, man. Well, good luck the next 24 hours.
Yeah. Good luck with your Western matchup.
All right. We'll talk Tuesday.